The stage pulled away from Cedar Ridge Depot in a cloud of October dust, leaving Anna Hartley standing alone on the platform with her carpetbag and a lie. No husband waited. No letters would explain. The ticket agent avoided her eyes as he pulled down the wooden shutters. 3 Indian head pennies weighed her reticule, all that remained after the westbound fare. The hotel demanded a week's payment up front. Shop windows displayed harvest corn while her stomach cramped from 2 days without food. Main Street emptied as lamplight pooled yellow on wooden walkways. Through the fogged glass of Molly's diner, she watched the last customer, a mountain man in worn wool, eating alone at a back table. His weathered hands moved with deliberate purpose, cutting meat with the patience of someone who understood hunger. Anna pressed her palm against the cold window, her reflection ghosting over his solid form. The door handle turned under her desperate fingers. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. The bell above Molly's door announced Anna's entrance with a cheerful brass note that mocked her desperation. Warmth hit her face, carrying scents of venison stew and fresh cornbread that made her knees weak. The mountain man didn't look up from his blue willow plate. "Kitchen's closing," Molly called from behind the counter, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron. Her eyes took in Anna's carpetbag, the travel-worn dress, the way hunger made a body stand. "Unless you're meeting someone," Anna's practiced lie rose to her lips. "I'm waiting for—" The words died. Through the window. She could see the depot. Dark now. No one would come. The mountain man's fork stopped moving. Without raising his eyes, he pushed back the chair opposite him with one boot. The scrape of wood against wood filled the silence. His weathered hand moved his plate to the exact center of the table, then set down his fork on one side. From his vest, he produced another fork and knife, placing them on the empty side with deliberate care. No invitation, no words, just the quiet arithmetic of sharing. Anna's pride warred with her stomach. Pride had gotten her this far onto a train with a promise that proved false. To a town where she knew no one. To this moment where 3 pennies couldn't buy the cheapest meal on the board. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. She crossed the worn plank floor, her boots marking each step. The carpetbag dropped beside the offered chair. When she sat, the Rochester lamp overhead cast both their shadows on the checkered tablecloth, worn soft from countless washings. The mountain man Rowan, Molly had called him when he entered, divided the stew with mathematical precision. Half the venison chunks, half the winter vegetables, half the pool of rich gravy. The cornbread he tore down the middle, steam rising from its golden center. Anna's first bite nearly brought tears. The venison fell apart on her tongue, seasoned with herbs she couldn't name. 2 days of hunger made each carrot, each piece of potato taste like a miracle. She forced herself to eat slowly, matching his measured pace. Molly appeared with the coffee pot, filling a second cup without being asked. 2 cents for the extra cup, she said quietly. But Rowan was already sliding the coins across the table. They ate without conversation. Anna learned more from his silence than most men's speeches. The careful way he buttered his cornbread spoke of someone who'd known scarcity. His work-scarred hands moved with economy, wasting nothing. When a piece of meat fell from Anna's fork, her hands shaking slightly, he didn't notice, studying instead the darkness beyond the window. "Storm coming," he said finally, his voice rough as bark. "Temperatures dropping fast." Anna followed his gaze. She'd need to find shelter soon. The depot would be locked. Perhaps there was a church that wouldn't ask questions. Mountain road's no place for walking after dark. He still wasn't looking at her, addressing the window instead. Especially with weather turning. The words hung between them like an offer without obligation. Anna understood. He was giving her a choice while letting her keep her dignity. No questions about why she sat alone in a frontier town. No pity for her circumstances. "I can work," she said quietly. "Cook, clean, mend. I earn my keep." Didn't ask. He pushed back from the table, standing with the careful movement of someone who'd spent the day laboring. "But the cabin needs tending. Been empty too long since—" He stopped, jaw tightening around unspoken words. Molly bustled over with a cloth, wiping the already clean table. "Rowan's place is proper," she announced to the empty diner. "2 rooms, good locks. He built it solid when his Mary was alive. God rest her." The information was meant for Anna, delivered without looking at her. A widow's reference respectability offered without embarrassment. Rowan dropped coins on the table, enough for the full meal, not half. "Wagon's outside. Heading up now if you've decided." Anna rose, her decision made. Sometimes survival meant accepting grace when offered, even from strangers. Especially from strangers who understood that charity and kindness weren't the same thing. "My bag," she said simply. He nodded once, already moving toward the door. "I'll load it." Outside, the October night had turned sharp. Stars emerged above the mountain line like salt spilled across black cloth. Rowan's buckboard waited, the horses stamping against the cold. He lifted her carpetbag into the bed as if it weighed nothing, then stood by the wheel, waiting. Anna climbed up, arranging her skirts on the wooden bench, when he settled beside her, leaving proper space between them. She realized this was the first time since leaving San Francisco that she felt something other than afraid. The wagon rolled out of Cedar Ridge, wheels creaking a rhythm that sounded almost like a promise. Behind them, Molly's lamp went dark. Ahead, the mountain road rose into shadow and pine, leading somewhere Anna had never imagined when she'd boarded that train with her wedding dress packed in tissue. Sometimes rescue came not as grand gestures, but as a plate pushed to the center of a table, a fork placed within reach, a quiet acknowledgement that everyone deserved to eat, regardless of their story. The buckboard creaked as Rowan checked the leather traces one final time, his movements methodical in the moonlight. October's harvest moon hung full above Cedar Ridge, painting the empty street silver white and throwing shadows sharp as knives. Anna pulled her shawl tighter, watching him work. His hands moved with the unconscious skill of someone who'd harnessed horses in darkness more times than he could count. "Buffalo robe behind the bench," he said without looking up. "Night gets cold going up the mountain." Anna found it folded neat as a store display. The fur sighed soft against her fingers. When she wrapped it around her shoulders, it smelled of cedar and wood smoke, like it had been stored somewhere clean and dry. The weight of it felt protective, a barrier against more than just cold. Rowan swung up beside her with an economy of motion, taking the reins in hands that knew their business. The horses responded immediately, moving forward without need of command. The kerosene lantern hanging from its hook beside the bench swayed with the wagon's rhythm, casting a moving pool of yellow light that made the darkness beyond seem deeper. They passed the last buildings of Cedar Ridge within minutes. The general store with its covered walkway, the bank with its pretentious brick facade, the Methodist church with its white steeple all fell away behind them as the road began its climb. Soon, the only sign of town was a scatter of lamp-lit windows below, growing smaller with each switchback, until the pines rose between them and civilization like a living curtain. The road narrowed, becoming little more than 2 ruts carved by countless wagons. Pine branches reached overhead, forming a tunnel that blocked the moon. The darkness was complete except for the lantern's swing and bob. Anna found herself gripping the bench as the wagon tilted on a curve, the right wheels riding higher than the left. "Easy now," Rowan said, his voice steady as bedrock. The words could have been for the horses, but Anna felt them settle something in her chest. His calmness suggested this was routine, that the mountain road held no surprises for him. They climbed in silence for 20 minutes. The only sounds the creak of wheels, the jingle of harness, the steady clop of hooves on packed earth. Anna felt words building in her throat, explanations, justifications. The whole sorry tale of Malcolm Hartley, who'd sent train fare and promises, then disappeared like morning mist. But every time she drew breath to speak, the silence seemed more honest than anything she could say. "I can cook," she finally offered, the words falling small into the darkness. "And clean." I kept house for my father before he died. I know how to manage supplies. Tend a garden. I can earn. No explaining needed. His interruption was gentle but final. Everyone's got their reasons for being where they are. Yours are your own. The simplicity of it nearly undid her. After weeks of crafting her story for Malcolm, of preparing explanations for his family, of imagining the life she'd build as a merchant's wife in Cedar Ridge, to have someone accept her presence without requiring her history felt like having a bone set after weeks of walking on a break. The wagon crested a rise, and suddenly the world opened up. The mountainside fell away to their left, revealing a valley filled with moonlight. Far below, a river wound like spilled mercury. The sight pulled a small gasp from Anna. She hadn't expected such beauty from a night journey born of desperation. "Elk Valley," Rowan said, noting her reaction. "Come morning, you'll see why I built here." As if in answer, a bugle echoed across the valley, high, wild, lonely. An elk calling in the darkness. Another answered from farther away, the sound bouncing off invisible peaks until it seemed the whole mountain rang with their conversation. "They're moving to winter grounds," Rowan explained. "Every year, same path, same timing, reliable as seasons." There was something in the way he said it, reliable, that made Anna think he valued that quality above most others. She wondered what had made him prize consistency so highly, but the wondering felt too intimate for a wagon ride with a stranger. They turned away from the valley, following the road through thicker forest. The trees here were older, their trunks wide enough that the wagon could have driven through if they'd been hollow. The lantern light caught their bark, turning it to rough gold. An owl called somewhere above them, the sound making Anna start. "Barn owl," Rowan identified. "Got a nest in the big pine near the cabin. Been there 3 years now." The casual familiarity of it, knowing where an owl nested, marking time by its presence, spoke of a life rooted deep in this place. Anna tried to imagine knowing anything for 3 years, being anywhere long enough to watch seasons repeat themselves. Since her father's death, she'd been blown like a leaf from situation to situation, each promising stability that never materialized. The road leveled out, and through the trees, she saw light. Not the cold white of moon or stars, but the warm yellow of a lamp burning in a window. The sight hit her unexpected. Someone had lit that lamp. Someone expected Rowan's return. "You have help?" she asked, confused. "No." He shifted the reins to one hand, reaching into his pocket with the other. "But I left the lamp burning. Always do when I go to town. Can't abide coming home to a dark house." The admission revealed more than probably intended. Anna heard the echo of other homecomings, perhaps to a house lit by other hands. She wondered about Mary, the wife Molly had mentioned, but knew better than to ask. Some stories told themselves in time, or not at all. The cabin materialized from the darkness like something grown rather than built. Log walls chinked tight against weather, a stone chimney with smoke still threading from it, a front porch with a rocking chair placed to catch morning sun. A split-rail fence enclosed what must be a garden plot, though nothing grew there now but turned earth ready for winter's rest. Rowan brought the wagon to a stop beside the porch. The horses stood patient, knowing they were home. He climbed down first, then stood beside the wagon, not offering his hand, but present if needed. Anna managed her descent without assistance, though her legs shook slightly from cold and the long sit. "I'll see to the horses," he said, already moving to unhitch them. Doors unlatched, Anna retrieved her carpet bag from the wagon bed, its weight familiar in her hand. The porch steps were solid under her feet, no wobble or creak. The door opened smooth on oiled hinges. Inside, the lamp sat on a table near the window, its steady glow revealing a room that was clean but spare, a man's space, functional without ornament. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, banked coals still glowing red. A kitchen area filled one corner stove, dry sink, shelves with dishes stacked neat. A table with 2 chairs, as if company was possible but not expected. A closed door on the far wall must lead to sleeping quarters. Rowan entered, carrying an armload of firewood. He added 2 logs to the coals, adjusting them with practiced care until flames began to lick up their sides. The additional light revealed more details: books on a shelf, a rifle above the mantel, curtains at the windows that spoke of a woman's hand, though faded now with sun and time. Rooms through there, he indicated the closed door, was the main bedroom, but I sleep out here now. Lock works from inside. Bedding's fresh, changed it this morning. This morning, before he'd known she existed, much less that she'd need shelter. The kindness of it, the habit of readiness, made her throat tight. Bathhouse is out back, he continued, his tone matter-of-fact. Privy too. Water comes from the spring, always clean, always cold. There's a kettle if you need hot. He moved to a chest near the door, pulling out a wool blanket. Extra, if you need it. Mountains get cold, even with the stove running. Anna stood holding her carpet bag, overwhelmed by the simple catalog of amenities, after expecting nothing: a church floor, perhaps, or a barn if lucky to be offered privacy. Warmth, security felt like too much grace for one night. Thank you, she managed. He paused at the door to what she now understood was her room. I'm up before dawn. Coffee's always ready by first light. After that, we can figure what suits what work needs doing, what arrangement makes sense. But tonight, you rest. Tomorrow's soon enough for sorting details. He turned to go, then stopped. Name's Rowan McBride. Just Rowan's fine. Anna Hartley. He nodded once, as if sealing something. Sleep well, Miss Anna. Then he was gone, pulling a blanket from the chest for himself, banking the fire for the night. Anna entered her room, and found it exactly as promised. Clean, spare, but somehow welcoming. The bed was made with a quilt that must have been Mary's work, its pattern complex even in lamplight. A washstand with pitcher and bowl, a trunk at the foot of the bed, and the lock, brass and solid, that would let her sleep without fear for the first time in weeks. She set down her carpet bag, sat on the edge of the bed, and let herself feel the full weight of the day's strange turn. This morning she'd been a failed bride, abandoned at a frontier depot. Tonight she had shelter, offered with dignity and tact, from a man who understood that sometimes the greatest kindness was not asking questions. Through the thin wall, she heard Rowan settling for sleep, the rustle of blankets, the creak of floorboards under his weight, normal sounds of a normal evening. Except nothing about this was normal, and yet somehow, it felt more right than anything had felt since she'd left San Francisco with her wedding dress packed in tissue and her heart full of dangerous hope. Anna woke to the sound of a door closing carefully, as if someone was trying not to wake her. Gray light filtered through the curtain window, the kind that comes before true dawn when the world exists in shades of charcoal and ash. She lay still for a moment, remembering where she was: Rowan McBride's cabin. A bed that wasn't hers. Safety that came with obligations yet to be defined. Through the wall, she heard the scrape of a match, the pop of kindling catching fire, the clatter of a coffee pot being filled. He was keeping his word about coffee at first light. Anna rose quickly, pouring cold water from the pitcher into the basin, washing her face with the harsh lye soap she found wrapped in brown paper on the washstand. Her traveling dress was wrinkled beyond redemption, but she had one other in her carpet bag, a brown calico that had seen better days, but was at least clean. When she emerged from the room, Rowan was crouched by the fireplace, coaxing flames from split pine. He glanced up, nodded once, then returned to his work. The coffee pot sat on the stove, already beginning to steam. "Morning?" he said simply. "Morning." Anna surveyed the kitchen area, taking inventory with a housekeeper's eye. The Hoosier cabinet stood against one wall, its flour bin visible through the glass. Shelves held basic salt, sugar in a tin, cornmeal, a few cans of things. A sourdough crock sat on the back corner of the stove, and when she lifted the lid, the familiar sour smell rose up, though the starter looked gray and neglected. "When did you last feed this?" she asked, stirring it with a wooden spoon. "Week, maybe 2. He stood, brushing ash from his hands. Haven't had much use for it lately. Anna found flour in the Hoosier cabinet's bin, mixed a portion with water, and fed the starter. It would need regular tending to come back fully, but it wasn't dead. It'll be ready for bread in 2 days if I nurse it proper. She continued her assessment. The sad irons on the stove were rusty at the edges. The dish towels were clean but threadbare. Empty ball jars lined one shelf, testament to a time when someone had put up preserves. Now they stood vacant as abandoned houses. "You have eggs?" she asked, opening the cold box. "No chickens anymore. Coop's still standing, but—" He stopped. That same tightening of jaw she'd noticed last night. "Haven't kept them for a while." Anna found bacon wrapped in cloth, a few potatoes growing eyes in a bin, an onion that had seen better days. She could work with this. She'd worked with less. Within minutes, she had bacon sizzling in a cast-iron skillet, potatoes sliced thin and frying in the grease. The onion she diced fine, adding it to the potatoes. The coffee had boiled, and she moved it to the side of the stove to settle. In the Hoosier cabinet, she found a tin of baking powder that rattled when shaken still good, flour, a pinch of salt, a bit of the bacon grease, and she had biscuit dough forming under her hands. Rowan watched from near the door, as if unsure whether to help or stay out of the way. "Haven't seen anyone work that stove so efficient in what—" Another stop, another swallow of words. 3 years, Anna guessed gently, not looking up from cutting biscuits with an empty tin. Thereabouts. The biscuits went into the oven. Anna flipped the bacon, turned the potatoes. Her movements were economical, practiced, the dance of someone who'd kept house since childhood. When everything was ready, she plated it neat, not fancy, but proper, the way a meal should be presented, even if only 2 people saw it. They ate in silence at first, but it was a different silence than last night's. This morning's quiet held evaluation on both sides. Finally, Rowan pushed back from his empty plate. "I should show you the place. If you're staying, you should know what needs doing." They started with the root cellar, dug into the hillside behind the cabin. The shelves that should have held preserved vegetables and canned goods stood mostly empty. A few potatoes in a bin, some carrots packed in sand. Winter squash that would last another month, bachelor's provisions, enough to survive but not thrive. "Spring garden produced well," Rowan said, noting her expression. "But I didn't put much up, didn't see the point, just for one." The smokehouse was better stocked venison hanging, a ham that would last weeks. He knew how to provide meat, at least. The woodshed was full, split logs stacked neat to the rafters. The tool shed showed the same careful organization, everything in its place, blades oiled against rust. Then they reached the chicken coop. It stood at the garden's edge, built solid with good ventilation and proper roosts, but the door hung loose. The fence had gaps, and weeds grew through the floor. Still, the bones were good. Anna walked the perimeter, testing posts, examining the hen house. "Fox got the last ones," Rowan said. "Didn't have the heart to start over." "It could be productive again," Anna observed, pulling a climbing vine from the fence. "Wouldn't take much. New wire here, patch the door, clear the weeds. Town have chickens for sale. Molly knows someone who raises them. Could probably get a dozen hens, maybe a rooster." They continued the tour, the spring house with its constant flow of cold water, the barn with its 2 milk stalls, though only 1 cow stood there now, the sheds and structures that made a mountain homestead self-sufficient. Everything showed the same pattern, built well, maintained adequately, but missing the attention that turned a place from survival to home, back inside. Anna started a simple dinner beans she'd found dried in a jar. Cornbread from the revived starter's beginnings, the last of the bacon for flavor. As she worked, she felt Rowan watching from his chair by the fire, an almanac open on his lap showing October 1882. "You're wondering about the arrangement," she said, not making it a question. "Seems we should settle it clear." He closed the almanac. So there's no misunderstanding. Anna set down her spoon, wiped her hands on the threadbare towel, and faced him direct. I'm no charity case. Mr. Rowan, I work for what I receive. Just Rowan, he corrected. And I know you're not. Then here's what I propose. She began kneading bread dough as she talked, her hands working independent of her words. Room and board in exchange for keeping house. Cooking, cleaning, mending, laundry. I'll tend the garden come spring, manage the preserving, bring the chicken coop back to production. You provide the supplies and materials. I provide the labor. And if you want to leave, find something better. Anna's hands didn't pause in their rhythm. Then I tell you honest, give you time to make other arrangements. But I don't make commitments lightly. When I say I'll do something, it gets done. And he studied her, taking in the competent hands working the dough, the straight set of her shoulders, the direct way she met his eyes. You've kept house before. For my father from the time I was 12. He was a clerk in San Francisco. Never remarried after my mother died. I managed everything until consumption took him last year. And then she shaped the dough into a loaf, precise and careful. Then I made a foolish choice based on desperate circumstances. But I'm not that desperate woman anymore. I'm someone who can offer fair value for fair treatment. Rowan stood, walked to the stove where she worked. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the silver threading through dark hair, the weathering that came from seasons in mountain weather. My wife's been gone 3 years. Fever took her quick, before I could get her to town. Haven't had anyone in her kitchen since. The admission hung between them. Anna understood she wasn't just being offered work, but trusted with space that held memory. I'll respect what was hers, she said quietly. But a kitchen needs using. A house needs living. Otherwise, it's just walls and a roof. That why you fed the starter first thing? Partly. Also because bread makes a house smell like home. You'd forgotten that, I think. He almost smiled, just a slight lift at the corner of his mouth. Been a while since anyone told me what I'd forgotten. Get used to it. I speak plain when something needs saying. This time he did smile. Brief, but real. Mary was the same way. Said a man living alone gets peculiar if no one challenges him. Anna shaped the dough's final form, set it to rise near the stove's warmth. Then we understand each other. I'm not Mary. Won't try to be. But I can make this place productive again, if you'll let me. Rowan extended his hand, work-worn and steady. Then we have an agreement. Room and board for household management. We'll revisit come spring, see if it still suits both parties. Anna wiped her flour-dusted hand on her apron, then shook his firmly. His grip was careful but solid, the handshake of someone who meant their word. One more thing, she said, not releasing his hand yet. I'll need things from town, fabric for proper curtains, thread for mending, seeds for the garden, chickens for the coop. I'm not asking for frippery, just necessities to do the job right. Make a list. We'll go to town Saturday, get what's needed, within reason. I'm always reasonable. She released his hand, turned back to check the bread. Unreasonable people don't survive long in frontier life. That earned another almost smile. Molly's going to be insufferable when she hears you're staying. Why? Because she'll think she planned it all. Probably did, knowing her. Anna considered this. Maybe she did. Sometimes plans we don't make ourselves work out best. Rowan moved toward the door, collecting his hat from the peg. I'll be in the barn, fixing that fence. Coffee's always on if you need it. After he left, Anna stood in the kitchen, her kitchen now, at least temporarily. The bread dough rose slowly beside the stove. The beans bubbled on the back burner. Through the window, she could see Rowan heading to the barn, his stride purposeful. She pulled the threadbare towel from its hook, examined it critically. Yes, New dish towels would definitely be on the list, and proper curtains, and maybe some paint for those shelves. Not fancy, but proper. The way Mary would have wanted it kept. Probably. The way any house deserved to be kept when people chose to make it home. The sourdough starter bubbled in its crock, coming back to life with patient tending. Like everything else here, it seemed like herself, perhaps. Sometimes resurrection came not in dramatic moments, but in small acts of daily faith-feeding starter, kneading bread, making lists of necessary things, shaking hands on simple agreements that might grow into something neither party could yet imagine. Anna held the blue calico dress up to the window light, examining every seam with critical eyes. 2 weeks had passed since she'd arrived at Rowan's cabin. 2 weeks of establishing routines and rhythms that felt more natural than she'd expected. Now, faced with Saturday's harvest dance, she wished she had something finer to wear, though she knew wishing was as useful as trying to hold water in a sieve. "It's not mandatory," Rowan said from the doorway, watching her inspect the dress. "The dance. We don't have to go." "When did you last miss one?" Anna asked, not looking up from the small tear she'd found near the hem. "Haven't." "Then we're going." She located her sewing basket, threading a needle with practiced ease. "People will talk more if we don't show than if we do." Rowan shifted uncomfortably. "You sure you're ready for that?" "The talk." Anna's needle paused mid-stitch. "I've been talked about before. Survived it then. I'll survive it now. Besides," she continued sewing, "hiding suggests shame. I'm not ashamed of earning an honest living." He watched her work for a moment longer, then cleared his throat. "I'll oil the good harness. If we're going, might as well look respectable." Saturday came crisp and clear, the October air sharp enough to pink cheeks and make breath visible. Anna had washed her hair with rainwater and Castle soap, pinning it in a style that was proper without trying to appear above her station. The mended calico dress fit well enough, and she'd pressed it with the sad irons until every wrinkle surrendered. Her mother's cameo brooch, one of the few nice things she'd kept nestled at her throat. Rowan emerged from the barn dressed in his town clothes, clean black trousers, a white shirt that Anna had starched and ironed, a vest that had seen better days but was brushed clean. He'd trimmed his beard and combed his hair back with pomade. The transformation was striking from mountain hermit to respectable citizen. "You clean up well," Anna observed, gathering her shawl. "Mary always said—" He stopped, color rising in his cheeks. "That is, it matters. Making an effort." "Yes," Anna agreed simply. "It does." The ride to town felt different than that first night. Then she'd been desperate cargo. Now she sat as someone with purpose, even if that purpose would be questioned by everyone they met. The sun was setting as they reached Cedar Ridge, painting the buildings gold and casting long shadows across Main Street. Other wagons were already gathering near the Grange Hall, families arriving for the community's biggest social event of the season. The hall blazed with light from kerosene footlights and lanterns hung from rafters decorated with corn husks and autumn leaves. The sound of fiddle tuning carried through the open doors, mixed with laughter and the scrape of benches being moved aside for dancing. Anna's stomach tightened. She could face work, weather, and want. But facing the judgment of good Christian women was another challenge entirely. "We can still leave," Rowan offered quietly. "No." Anna lifted her chin. "We go in together. We leave together. That's how it's done." They entered the hall side by side, though not touching. The fiddle player was warming up in the corner while an accordion player adjusted his straps. Long tables held food, each family contributing something to share. Anna had brought 2 loaves of bread from the resurrected starter and a dried apple pie she'd managed from the cellar's meager stores. Conversations stuttered as they passed. Anna felt eyes tracking their movement, heard whispers start before they'd taken 3 steps. She kept her expression pleasant but neutral, the face of someone with nothing to hide and nothing to prove. Rowan McBride. Molly's voice cut through the whispers like a knife through warm butter. About time you showed your face at something social. She beamed at Anna. And don't you look lovely? Dear, that color suits you. Thank you, Mrs. Just Molly. Child. Come, let me introduce you to the other ladies. Before Anna could respond, Molly had her arm and was steering her toward a cluster of women near the food tables. Rowan touched Anna's elbow briefly the first time he touched her since their handshake, then moved off toward the men gathering near the door. The women's expressions ranged from curious to skeptical to barely concealed disapproval. Molly performed introductions with the determination of a general taking a hill. This is Anna Hartley. She's keeping house for Rowan. You know how that cabin was deteriorating with just him rattling around. Anna, this is Mrs. Watson, the banker's wife, Mrs. Phillips from the mercantile, Mrs. Douglas, her husband runs the lumber mill. Mrs. Watson, a narrow woman with steel-gray hair and a mouth like a paper cut, looked Anna up and down. Miss Hartley, we heard about the disappointment with Malcolm Hartley, a relation of yours. No relation, Anna replied evenly. Just unfortunate coincidence of surnames. Still, to come all this way for a marriage that didn't materialize, how devastating. The sympathy in her voice was as thin as February ice. Disappointing, certainly, Anna agreed. But I've found honest work, which is more than some can say. Mrs. Phillips, rounder and seemingly kinder, leaned forward. And Rowan's treating you proper. We worry. A young woman alone with a bachelor. Mr. McBride has been entirely appropriate. I have my own room with a good lock, and we've established clear terms of employment. I keep house. He provides room and board. It's no different than being a housekeeper in any establishment, except most establishments have other people around. Mrs. Watson observed. For propriety's sake. Anna felt heat rising in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. Propriety is about behavior, not witnesses. I'd trust Mr. McBride's honor over many men who sit in church pews every Sunday. The women exchanged glances. Before they could respond, the fiddle struck up a reel, and couples began forming on the dance floor. Anna excused herself to check on her food contributions, grateful for the escape. She was arranging her bread slices when she felt presence behind her several presences. Mrs. Watson had recruited reinforcements, 3 more women with faces like they'd been sucking lemons. We're simply concerned, Mrs. Watson said, though concern was the last thing in her voice. A young woman's reputation is so fragile, and living with a man, even as his housekeeper, well, people will assume things. Then people should mind their own business, Anna replied, but she was being backed toward the wall, the women forming a half circle that trapped her. We're trying to help, another woman said. Perhaps you could find accommodation in town, work for Rowan during the day only. Miss Anna's with me. Rowan's voice cut through their suggestions like an axe through kindling. He stood just behind the women, his expression calm but his presence suddenly formidable. Is there a problem, ladies? Mrs. Watson turned, her smile bright and false. We were just offering Miss Hartley some advice. Miss Anna doesn't need advice. She's managing my household better than it's been managed in years. The arrangement suits us both, and that's all anyone needs to know. He moved past the women to Anna's side, not touching, but close enough that his intention was clear. Dance is starting, he said to her. Shall we? Anna had to swallow twice before she could answer. I'd like that. They moved onto the floor as the fiddle player called for partners for a Virginia reel. Anna took her place in the women's line while Rowan joined the men opposite. When the music started, she focused on the steps, trying to ignore the eyes following their every movement. But as the dance progressed, something shifted. Other couples nodded to them as they passed in the patterns. Men from the mountains, taciturn and independent, gave Rowan small gestures of approval. Their wives, practical women who understood hard choices, offered Anna brief smiles. When the reel ended and the accordion player announced a waltz, Anna expected Rowan to return to the men's corner. Instead, he extended his hand. "I'm not much for waltzing," he warned quietly. "Then we'll muddle through together." His hand was warm and calloused against hers. His other hand settled at her waist with careful propriety. When the music started, they moved into the simple box step, neither graceful nor clumsy, just two people finding rhythm together. "Thank you," Anna said quietly. "For earlier. Shouldn't have let them corner you in the first place. I can fight my own battles." "I know." He guided her through a turn. "But you shouldn't always have to. Not alone." Something in his voice made her look up. His gray eyes were serious, focused on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'm not Mary," she said, words she'd said before but with different meaning now. "I know that too." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Wouldn't want you to be. Mary never would have stood up to Mrs. Watson like that. She was too gentle for her own good sometimes." The waltz continued, and gradually Anna became aware that they'd stopped being the center of attention. Other couples danced, children ran between the adults. Normal harvest dance chaos resumed. She and Rowan had passed some invisible test, or at least been granted provisional acceptance. When the music finally ended near midnight, they made their farewells. Molly hugged Anna tight. "You did well, child. Let them gossip. They'll tire of it soon enough when they see you're making Rowan human again." Outside, the mountain air was sharp with the promise of frost. Rowan helped Anna into the wagon, his hands lingering a moment at her waist. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the moon lighting their way up the familiar road. "I haven't danced since Mary," Rowan said suddenly. "Didn't think I would again." "Was it terrible?" "No." He glanced at her, moonlight catching the slight smile on his face. "No, it wasn't terrible at all." They were passing the spot where the valley opened up, where he'd identified the elk that first night. This time, Anna could see it clearly, mountains rising like waves against the star-filled sky, the river a ribbon of silver far below. Beautiful and wild and nothing like San Francisco's tame streets. "I'm glad I stayed," she said, words falling soft into the darkness. "So am I," Rowan replied, just as soft. The cabin appeared ahead, the lamp he'd left burning glowing warm in the window. As they pulled up, Anna realized something had changed. They were still employer and housekeeper in the practical sense, but Rowan's public claim, "Miss Anna's with me," had shifted something fundamental. They were connected now, their reputations linked, their futures no longer entirely separate. "Thank you for the dance," she said as he helped her down from the wagon. "Thank you for making me remember how—" Inside, the cabin felt different too, not just shelter or workplace, but something moving toward home. Anna hung her shawl on the peg beside Rowan's coat, a small gesture that felt momentous. They bid each other good night with new awkwardness, aware of territory crossed. In her room, Anna unpinned her hair and changed into her nightgown, listening to Rowan bank the fire and settle for sleep. Through the thin wall, she heard him wind his pocket watch, the same nightly ritual she'd grown accustomed to. But tonight it sounded different, less like a stranger's habit, and more like the rhythm of shared living. The small music of two lives learning to harmonize. Tomorrow would bring Sunday's quiet chores, Monday's return to routine. But something had been acknowledged tonight in front of the whole town, something that would grow through winter's coming darkness like her resurrected sourdough starter patient, persistent and surprisingly strong. 3 weeks had passed since the harvest dance, and Anna had settled into a rhythm that felt almost like peace. November arrived with frost on the windows and wood smoke hanging low in the valley. She'd established Tuesday as her town day, posting Rowan's letters to the lumber company, purchasing supplies from Phillips's mercantile, exchanging pleasantries with women who'd moved from suspicion to grudging acceptance. This Tuesday started like the others. Anna wrapped herself in her heavy shawl and took the wagon down alone. Rowan trusted her with the horses now, and she took pride in managing them competently. The sky hung low and gray, promising snow before week's end. She tied the horses outside the post office, her list of errands mental but precise: salt pork from the mercantile, more thread for the quilting she'd started, lamp oil, and check for any mail, though Rowan rarely received more than lumber contracts. The post office occupied a corner of the land office, presided over by Mr. Henley, a thin man who treated mail like sacred documents. He looked up when the bell chimed her entrance, and something in his expression made Anna's step slow. "Morning, Miss Hartley." His voice carried that careful tone people used when delivering news they'd rather not share. "Cold one today. Winter's coming early," Anna agreed, approaching the counter. "Any mail for the McBride place?" Henley turned to the grid of wooden cubbyholes behind him, each labeled with names of Cedar Ridge's residents. The McBride slot held 2 lumber contracts that Anna recognized. But Henley hesitated, his hand hovering over another shelf, the one marked General Delivery for strangers and uncertain addresses. "This came forwarded from San Francisco," he said carefully, producing an envelope with her name in elaborate script. "Been sitting here near a week. Wasn't sure if I should... that is, if you'd want it." Anna stared at the envelope. Even before touching it, she recognized the handwriting, not Malcolm's weak scrawl, but his sister's aggressive penmanship. The envelope bore multiple postal cancellation stamps, tracking its journey from San Francisco to Cedar Ridge like a persistent ghost. Red sealing wax on the back showed the Hartley family crest, pretentious affectation for a merchant family barely 2 generations from poverty. "Thank you," Anna managed, taking the letter. It felt heavier than paper should, weighted with implications. "None of my business," Henley said, studying the ceiling. "But sometimes mail from back home isn't welcome. If you don't want it, stove's right there." The kindness in the offer nearly undid her. This man who barely knew her understood that some messages brought only pain. "I'll deal with it appropriately," she said. Tucking the letter into her basket beneath the lumber contracts, she completed her errands mechanically. Mrs. Phillips chatted about the coming winter while measuring salt pork. The thread selection required no real thought. The lamp oil filled its container with the same glug-glug sound as always. But the letter sat in her basket like a live coal, burning through the cloth, demanding attention. The ride home stretched longer than usual. Twice Anna stopped the wagon, pulled out the letter, considered throwing it into the brush, but that felt like cowardice. She'd face whatever venom Margaret Hartley had committed to paper, then decide its fate. The cabin was empty when she arrived, Rowan working the far pasture. Mending fence before snow made the task impossible. Anna put away supplies with automatic precision, then sat at the kitchen table with the letter before her. The red wax seal mocked her with its pretensions. She broke it with a knife, unfolded pages covered in Margaret's imperious hand. "Miss Hartley," it began, not even granting her the dignity of her first name. "Your unconscionable behavior has brought considerable embarrassment upon our family. To abandon my brother at the very threshold of matrimony, leaving him to explain your absence to assembled guests and business associates, represents a breach not only of promise but of basic human decency." Anna's hands began to shake. She pressed them flat against the oilcloth table cover, forced herself to continue reading. "Malcolm invested considerable resources in bringing you to California train fare, wedding arrangements, housing preparations. That you would reject his generosity after accepting these expenditures suggests a calculating nature we did not initially perceive. Perhaps your father's debts were greater than you represented. Perhaps your moral character is more compromised than a simple clerk's daughter would admit." The words blurred. Anna blinked hard, refusing tears the satisfaction of falling. The letter continued for 2 more pages, each paragraph more vicious than the last. Demands for reimbursement of expenses, threats of legal action for breach of promise, insinuations about what type of woman would live with a man unwed. News that had apparently reached San Francisco through the mysterious tentacles of gossip. The final paragraph was the cruelest: "You have 7 days from receipt to respond with either full reimbursement or your immediate return to fulfill your obligations. Malcolm has magnanimously agreed to overlook your temporary madness. Fail to comply, and we shall pursue every legal remedy available, including publication of your shameful behavior in newspapers both in San Francisco and your current location." Anna read it twice, then set it carefully aside. Her hands had stopped shaking, replaced by a cold clarity. She rose, added wood to the stove, checked the beef stew she'd started that morning. Normal actions while her mind raced through implications. She had no money for reimbursement. Returning was unthinkable even if she wanted to, which she emphatically did not. Legal action seemed unlikely given the distance and expense, but the threat of publication, of public shaming in Cedar Ridge just when she'd found her footing. The door opened. Rowan entered, bringing cold air and the smell of pine pitch from fence mending. He stopped immediately, reading something in her posture or the set of her shoulders. "What's wrong?" Anna turned from the stove, the letters still on the table between them. Mail came. His eyes found the unfolded pages, the broken seal, her too careful movements. "Bad news." She almost laughed. "Depends on perspective. My former fiancé's family feels I owe them money. Or my immediate return to marry a man who left me standing at a train depot." Rowan hung his coat on its peg, moving with the same deliberate calm he used around spooked horses. "They have grounds. They paid my train fare, made wedding arrangements." Anna picked up the letter, holding it between thumb and finger like something contaminated. "Apparently, accepting those things constitutes a binding obligation to marry regardless of subsequent abandonment. That's not how law works." "No, but shame doesn't require legal standing." She moved toward the stove, letter in hand. "They threatened to publish my shameful behavior in the local papers. Make sure everyone knows I'm a woman of compromised moral character, living in sin with a mountain man." Rowan crossed the room in 3 strides, but stopped short of touching her. "Anna, the funny thing is," she continued, opening the stove's iron door, "they think they're threatening someone who still exists. The desperate woman who believed Malcolm Hartley's promises, who packed her dead mother's wedding dress, who thought marriage to a stranger was her only option." She looked at the letter one last time. "That woman doesn't exist anymore." She fed the pages to the flames, watching Margaret's elaborate penmanship curl and blacken. The red wax seal melted, running like blood before disappearing into ash. The fire consumed years of careful planning, desperate hope, calculated survival, all of it turning to smoke and nothing. "I killed her," Anna said quietly, still watching the flames. "That frightened girl who would have accepted anything for security. She died somewhere between that train platform and your wagon. Maybe at Molly's table when you pushed that plate across. Maybe on the mountain road when you said no explaining needed. But she's gone, and I won't mourn her." She closed the stove door, turned to find Rowan standing closer than she'd expected. His gray eyes held something she couldn't quite name, not pity, which would have destroyed her, but recognition, like he understood the necessity of burning former selves. "Need to talk about it?" he asked quietly. Anna considered. "They want money I don't have for a wedding that didn't happen to a man who didn't want me. They threaten shame I've already survived and publicity that would only embarrass them more than me. What's to discuss? Your plans, if this changes things. Do you want me to leave?" "No." The word came fast and firm. "That's not what I'm asking. But if you need to handle this, if you need to go back, my past has no claim on my future." Anna interrupted. "Whatever debts that other woman incurred died with her. I'm Anna Hartley, who keeps house for Rowan McBride, who makes bread from rescued starter, who stood up to Mrs. Watson at the harvest dance. That's who I choose to be." Rowan studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Good." He moved toward the door, collecting his work gloves from the shelf. "Winter wheat needs planting tomorrow. Could use help if you're willing. 2 people working together get it done in half the time." The shift was so typically him, from emotional revelation to practical necessity without missing a beat. Anna found herself almost smiling. "I can help, though I've never planted wheat before." "You'll learn. You're good at learning." He paused at the door, looking back. "Anna, if they send more letters, if they make good on threats, we'll handle it. Together. You're not alone in this anymore." The words settled into her chest like warm stones. "I know," she said, and meant it. After he left, Anna stood in the kitchen that had become hers through daily use and careful attention. The stew bubbled on the stove. Bread dough rose in its bowl. The letter's ashes had already mixed with yesterday's wood ash, indistinguishable and irrelevant. Through the window, she could see Rowan heading back to the pasture, his stride purposeful and steady. Tomorrow they'd plant winter wheat together, hands working the same soil, building something that would grow through snow and darkness to emerge green in spring. It seemed appropriate somehow, planting future crops the day after burning past obligations. She pulled the stew to the cooler side of the stove, checked her bread, began setting the table for dinner. Her hands were steady now, sure in their movements. Whatever Margaret Hartley thought she could threaten, whatever Malcolm thought he was owed, they were threatening a ghost. The woman they'd known was ash in the stove. The woman standing in this kitchen had work to do, wheat to plant, a life to build with deliberate choice rather than desperate necessity. Anna opened the wooden box where she kept her few precious things, her mother's cameo, her father's watch, the small Bible that had traveled from San Francisco. At the bottom lay her train ticket stub, kept, she didn't know why. She pulled it out, studied the faded printing one way. San Francisco to Cedar Ridge, one way, like all journeys that mattered. She added it to the stove, watching it flare and disappear. No souvenirs needed from that former life. Tomorrow would bring wheat planting and new calluses, and Rowan's quiet presence working beside her. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything. The table set, the meal ready. Anna stood at the window watching for Rowan's return. Snow was beginning to fall. Fat, lazy flakes that would cover the ground by morning. Good for the wheat, he'd said. Insulation against winter's worst cold. She thought about that, how something that seemed like burial could actually be protection. How the right kind of covering could ensure survival rather than prevent it. When Rowan appeared through the falling snow, Anna lit the lamp in the window, their signal that dinner was ready, that someone waited, that coming home meant more than just returning to shelter. He raised his hand in acknowledgement, and she turned back to the stove, ladling stew into bowls, slicing bread still warm from the oven. Simple tasks that had become sacramental through repetition and choice. The letter's ashes had already cooled in the stove, mixed with wood ash and char, impossible to separate or identify. As it should be. Some things deserved no monument except the lives built upon their destruction. The mercury barometer on the kitchen wall had been dropping all morning. Anna watched it between tasks, noting how the silver line crept steadily downward like water draining from a basin. Outside, the November sky hung yellow-gray, the peculiar color that preceded serious weather. The animals knew it too. The milk cow lowed constantly from the barn, and the horses stamped in their stalls with increasing agitation. Rowan came in from checking the livestock, ice crystals already forming on his beard, though the real snow hadn't started. "Storm coming fast, he said, not bothering with preamble. "Bigger than expected. We need to secure everything now." Anna dried her hands on her apron, already moving toward her heavy shawl. "What needs doing? Harvest stores in the barn need moving to the root cellar. Animals need extra feed brought down from the loft. Water barrels need filling before the spring freezes." He was already pulling on his heavy coat. "I can handle it." "Two people work faster than one," Anna interrupted, wrapping her shawl tight and pulling on the thick mittens she'd knitted in the evenings. "Tell me what to carry." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "The smaller sacks of grain. I'll handle the heavy barrels. We need to work fast. This storm's moving like a freight train." They raced against the darkening sky. Anna made trip after trip from barn to root cellar, carrying grain sacks, preserved vegetables, anything that couldn't survive a deep freeze. Her shoulders ached and her fingers went numb despite the mittens. But she didn't slow. Rowan worked alongside her, moving with urgent efficiency, occasionally calling out warnings about ice patches or loose boards. The wind picked up as they worked, going from breeze to howl in the span of an hour. The first snow came sideways, sharp as needles against exposed skin. Anna's skirts whipped around her legs, making walking treacherous. Still, they continued filling water barrels from the spring before it iced over, hauling hay bales from the loft to pile near the animals' stalls, securing loose boards that would become projectiles in high wind. "That's the last of it!" Rowan shouted over the wind, wrestling the barn door shut and barring it. "Get inside!" But Anna was checking the chicken coop she'd restored, making sure the birds were secured. The wind caught the coop door, slamming it back against the wall with a crack like gunshot. She fought to close it, the wind stronger than seemed possible, when suddenly Rowan was there, adding his strength to hers. Together, they forced it shut, dropping the bar into place. House now. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the cabin. The snow had gone from beginning to blizzard in minutes. Anna couldn't see more than 3 feet ahead. The cabin, only 50 yards from the barn, had vanished in white. Rowan's hand on her arm was the only solid thing in a world suddenly made of wind and ice. They stumbled forward, Anna trusting Rowan's knowledge of his own land. Her foot caught on something, a root, a rock. Impossible to tell, and she went down hard, knee striking frozen ground. Rowan hauled her up without stopping, half carrying her now. Then, impossibly, they were walking past where the cabin should be. Anna knew it. Even in the whiteout they'd gone too far, missed it in the storm. "Wait!" she shouted, though the wind tore the word away. "We've passed it." Rowan stopped, turning in a full circle, trying to get his bearings in the featureless white. Anna could feel his uncertainty, the way his grip on her arm tightened. They were lost in their own yard, snow already collecting on their shoulders and heads. "Call out!" Rowan shouted directly in her ear. "Keep calling. Sound travels different in snow." They stood back to back, shouting into the storm. "Here, we're here," over and over until Anna's throat went raw. Then, between wind gusts, she heard at the barn door they'd just barred, banging despite the bar, making a rhythm she recognized. "This way." She pulled Rowan toward the sound. If they could find the barn again, find the rope guide Rowan had strung between buildings for just such emergencies. Her outstretched hand hit wood the barn wall. She felt along it until she found the rope, thick and ice-covered but solid. Together they followed it hand over hand, fighting through wind that wanted to tear them loose, until the darker bulk of the cabin materialized from the white. The door. When Rowan shouldered it open, felt like deliverance. They tumbled inside, bringing a cloud of snow with them. Rowan slammed the door, dropped the bar across it, then leaned against it, breathing hard. Anna collapsed into the nearest chair, her whole body shaking from cold, from exertion, from the near miss of being lost in their own yard. "Your knee," Rowan said, moving toward her. Anna looked down. Her dress was torn where she'd fallen, blood seeping through. "It's nothing. It's not nothing." He was already getting the medical box from the shelf, the one she'd organized with bandages and carbolic and other necessities. "Let me see." She pulled her skirt up just enough to reveal the gashed knee. Rowan knelt before her, cleaning the wound with careful efficiency. His hands were gentle despite their size, treating her injury with the same focused attention he gave everything important. "This'll need bear grease to prevent frostbite scarring," he said, reaching for the tin they kept for such purposes. The grease smelled wild and animal, but Anna knew it worked, mountain remedy proven through generations. As he worked, the storm intensified outside. Wind screamed around the cabin corners, rattling the windows until Rowan got up to hang quilts over them for insulation. Snow built up against the walls, they could hear it, a soft accumulation that would soon reach the sills. "We're snowed in," Anna observed unnecessarily. 3 days, maybe 4, judging by this storm's temper. Rowan added more wood to the fire, building it higher than usual. "Hope you don't mind being trapped with just me for company." "I've had worse company," Anna said, testing her bandaged knee. It hurt but held her weight. They worked together to prepare for the siege, filling every available container with water before the pump froze, bringing in armloads of wood from the covered pile by the door, setting warming stones by the fire to heat the beds later. The familiar tasks felt different with the storm raging outside, like they were the only two people left in a world made entirely of white and wind. By evening, snow had covered the windows despite the quilts. The cabin existed in its own bubble of warmth and lamplight, cut off from everything beyond its walls. They ate dinner beans and cornbread, simple but filling while the storm raged its fury outside. Afterward, they sat by the fire, Anna mending a shirt while Rowan sharpened tools. The silence between them had evolved over the months from awkward to comfortable, but tonight it felt different, charged somehow, like the storm outside had created a corresponding pressure inside. "You were scared," Rowan said suddenly. "When we were lost? Weren't you?" "Yes." He set down the whetstone, staring into the fire. "But not of dying. Scared of—" He stopped, jaw working around words that wouldn't come easy. "Of what?" Anna prompted gently. "Of losing someone again. To weather. To something I couldn't fight." His voice had gone rough. "Mary died in a storm. Not like this, a summer storm. Lightning struck near the house. She ran out to get laundry from the line. Tree came down. Caught her wrong. By the time I found her, got her inside." He stopped again, hands clenched on his knees. "Doctor couldn't have done anything even if I'd gotten her to town. But I've always wondered, if I'd been faster, if I'd seen the storm coming sooner." Anna set down her mending. "You can't predict acts of God." "No, but you try anyway. Watch the barometer, study the sky, string rope guides between buildings." He gestured at the storm outside. "All because you couldn't prevent one tragedy 3 years past. Is that why you live alone? Punishment for something that wasn't your fault." "Not punishment." Rowan looked at her directly for the first time since starting this conversation. "Fear. Easier to lose nothing if you have nothing to lose." Anna understood that logic intimately. Hadn't she nearly accepted Malcolm for the same reason: safety and emptiness, protection and low expectations? "But you let me stay." "I did." "Why?" He was quiet for a long moment, fire popping and wind howling filling the silence. "Because you didn't need saving. You needed opportunity. There's a difference." He picked up the whetstone again but didn't use it, just turned it in his hands. "Mary needed saving constantly. From storms, from hard work, from difficult neighbors. I loved her, but I was always afraid of not being enough, of failing her. When she died, part of me felt—" He stopped, shoulders hunching. "Relieved," Anna supplied quietly. His head snapped up, eyes wide with surprise and something like shame. "How did you—" "Because I felt it too, when my father died. Love and relief tangled together so tight you can't separate them. Guilt for feeling free when you should only feel grief." Rowan stared at her like she'd spoken in tongues. "I've never told anyone that." "Who could you tell? The good people of Cedar Ridge who expect you to be the grieving widower forever. You don't?" "No. I expect you to be human. Complicated. Allowed to feel multiple things without choosing just one as the truth." The wind gusted hard enough to shake the cabin. They both looked toward the door, half expecting it to blow open despite the bar. It held. But snow was sifting in underneath, forming a small drift against the threshold. Rowan got up, grabbed an old blanket, and stuffed it against the gap. When he turned back, something had shifted in his expression. "I was terrified today, when we were lost, not of the storm, but of losing you, of having you disappear into white and never finding you again." Anna's breath caught. "You didn't lose me." "No." He moved closer to her chair, close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. "I didn't. Because you held on, because you called out, because you found the barn when I'd lost all bearing. We found it together. Together." He repeated the word like he was tasting it. "That's been the difference, hasn't it? Everything we've done since you arrived. Together." Anna stood, her knee protesting slightly but holding. They were very close now, the fire warming one side while the storm-cooled air touched the other. "Is that what you want? Together? I want." He stopped, started again. "I want to not be afraid anymore. Of storms, of loss, of feeling things I thought had died with Mary." What things? Instead of answering with words, he reached out slowly, giving her time to step back, and touched her face. His palm was calloused and warm against her cheek. Anna leaned into it, her eyes closing briefly. "This," he said simply. The storm chose that moment to intensify, wind shrieking like something alive and angry. They both turned toward it, the spell breaking but not shattering. Rowan's hand dropped, but he didn't step back. "We should bank the fire for the night," he said, voice carefully neutral. "Tomorrow we'll bring work enough digging out, checking animals, assessing damage." Anna nodded, understanding they'd reached a edge tonight but wouldn't cross it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But acknowledging its existence had changed something fundamental between them. They prepared for bed with the same routine as always, but heightened awareness colored every movement. When Anna bid him good night at her door, their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary. The storm continued its assault on the cabin, but inside, a different kind of pressure was building slower, quieter, but just as inexorable as any blizzard nature could conjure. In her room, Anna lay listening to wind and memory in equal measure. Rowan's confession about Mary, about fear and relief and the terrible tangle of grief, had cracked something open between them. Not love, not yet, but understanding. The kind that only came from surviving your worst fears and finding someone else who'd done the same. The storm would blow itself out by morning or the next day. They'd dig out, assess, rebuild whatever needed rebuilding, but they'd do it together. And that word had taken on new weight tonight, heavy with possibility and fragile as frost on a window pane. Spring came late to the mountains, arriving in fits and starts like an argument between seasons. One day would bring warm sun that melted snow into running streams. The next would snap back to frost that turned the mud solid as stone. It was during such a thaw in early April that Anna first saw the riders approaching the cabin, 2 men on horseback, picking their way carefully through the spring mud that grabbed at their horses' hooves. She was in the garden, turning soil that had finally softened enough to work. The winter had passed in quiet rhythms, she and Rowan moving around each other with increasing ease, sharing meals and evening conversations, building something unnamed but undeniable. The kiss that hadn't happened during the November storm hung between them like morning mist, visible but intangible, waiting for the right moment to either dissipate or condense into something solid. "Rowan," she called, her voice steady despite the way her pulse quickened. He emerged from the barn where he'd been checking on a sick calf, saw the riders, and moved with deliberate calm to stand beside her. The first rider she recognized as Sheriff Watson from town, a decent man who'd tipped his hat to her at Sunday services. The second was a stranger in a city suit now splattered with mud, sitting his horse like someone unaccustomed to riding. But even at a distance, Anna recognized the weak chin, the pale complexion, the slight build that looked smaller against the mountain backdrop. Malcolm Hartley had finally come to claim his property. "Anna," Rowan said quietly, "you can go inside. I'll handle this." "No." She set down her hoe, wiped her hands on her apron, and straightened her shoulders. "This is mine to face." The riders reached the gate. Sheriff Watson dismounted first, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Hartley." "Rowan." He touched his tin star like it might protect him from the awkwardness of the situation. "This gentleman says he has legal business with Miss Hartley." Malcolm dismounted clumsily, his city boots slipping in the mud. He looked older than his letters had suggested, aged by whatever humiliation her abandonment had caused. His clothes, though well made, hung loose like he'd lost weight. When he looked at Anna, his expression mixed anger, embarrassment, and something like hunger. "Anna!" He said her name like he owned it, You're coming back with me. No, Anna replied simply. I'm not. Malcolm pulled a sheaf of papers from his coat, water-stained from the journey. I have legal documents, a signed marriage contract, train tickets purchased in good faith, letters promising union. He waved them at the sheriff. She's stolen from me. Time, money, reputation. People aren't property to steal, Anna said, her voice carrying clear in the spring air. And promises require two parties to keep them. You weren't at the station. Malcolm, you never came. I was delayed by business. For 3 days with no word. Anna stepped forward, and Rowan moved with her, not touching, but present. You left me standing on a platform in a strange town with 3 pennies to my name. That doesn't void the contract, Malcolm insisted, his voice rising to a whine that reminded Anna why she dreaded his letters even before meeting him. You accepted my money, my offer. You owe me. I owe you nothing. Anna's voice cut through his complaints like a scythe through wheat. Sheriff Watson, if this man has legitimate legal claims, I'll address them in town, publicly, with witnesses. I won't be dragged away like property being reclaimed. The sheriff looked relieved. That seems reasonable. Tomorrow, noon, at the courthouse, we'll sort this proper. Malcolm started to protest, but the sheriff's expression hardened. This is my jurisdiction, Mr. Hartley. We do things legal and proper here. You'll get your hearing, but Miss Hartley gets her say, too. She's living in sin, Malcolm burst out, pointing at Rowan. Unmarried, sharing a house. I'm Mr. McBride's housekeeper. Anna interrupted. I have my own room, earn honest wages, and my reputation in this community stands on its own merit. Which is more than you can say, showing up months later like a dog returning to buried bones. Malcolm's face went purple, but before he could respond, Rowan stepped forward, just one step. But Malcolm stumbled backward, nearly falling in the mud. Tomorrow, noon, Rowan said quietly. Until then, get off my land. The sheriff helped Malcolm mount his horse. The man's hands were shaking with rage or cold or both. As they rode away, Malcolm turned back once, and the look he gave Anna promised humiliation, revenge, whatever power he thought he still wielded. You didn't have to agree to the hearing, Rowan said once they were gone. Yes, I did. Anna picked up her hoe, but her hands were trembling slightly. Running makes me guilty of something. I won't give him that satisfaction. That evening, word spread through Cedar Ridge like wildfire. By morning, when Anna and Rowan drove to town, it seemed every soul in the valley had found reason to be near the courthouse. The general store's covered walkway was packed with observers. Women clustered in groups, whispering behind gloved hands. Men leaned against hitching posts, trying to look casual about their curiosity. The courthouse was really just the larger room in the town hall, with Mayor Phillips presiding since they had no proper judge. Malcolm sat at one table with a lawyer he'd apparently hired from the larger town downriver, a sharp-faced man with documents spread before him like weapons. Anna sat at another table, alone by her choice, despite Rowan's offer to sit with her. This is a simple matter, the lawyer began, standing with practiced ease. Miss Hartley entered into a binding agreement. Money was exchanged. Promises were made. Her abandonment of this contract has caused my client considerable financial and social damage. He presented the evidence train tickets, letters Anna had written accepting Malcolm's proposal, receipts for wedding expenses. Each piece felt like another stone added to a wall building around her. When the lawyer finished, Mayor Phillips looked at Anna. Miss Hartley, your response. Anna stood, smoothing her best dress, the blue calico she'd worn to the harvest dance, mended and pressed with extra care. The room was packed, every bench full, people standing along the walls. She saw Molly near the front, Mrs. Watson with her perpetual disapproval, the Mountain families who'd quietly accepted her, and Rowan by the door, positioned to see everything while staying out of the proceedings. Mr. Hartley's lawyer speaks of contracts and promises, Anna began, her voice starting soft but gaining strength. Let me speak of what actually happened. Yes, I accepted Mr. Hartley's offer. My father had died, leaving debts. I had no family, few prospects. Marriage seemed my only option for survival. She turned to look at Malcolm directly. He wouldn't meet her eyes. I traveled to Cedar Ridge in good faith. I waited at the station for 3 days. Mr. Hartley never appeared. No message, no explanation. I was left destitute in a strange town where I knew no one. Her voice grew stronger, filling the room. By any measurement, he abandoned the contract first. You could have waited longer. The lawyer interrupted. With what resources, I had 3 pennies. The hotel required payment I couldn't provide. I would have starved or worse if not for the kindness of strangers who owed me nothing. She gestured to Molly, to Rowan. I survived through honest work, rebuilt my life through my own effort. Now Mr. Hartley appears, months later, wanting to collect me like a forgotten package. But I am no man's property. I choose where I stand, and I stand here. The room erupted in murmurs. Mayor Phillips banged his gavel for order. Furthermore, Anna continued, I have evidence of my own. She pulled out a carefully preserved telegram from her pocket. This arrived at the hotel 3 days after I did, finally explaining Mr. Hartley's absence. Would you like to read it aloud? Malcolm, or shall I? Malcolm's face went white. His lawyer reached for the telegram, read it, and his expression soured. Anna took it back, read clearly. Business matters require presence in Sacramento. Stop. We'll send word when free. Stop. Make yourself comfortable. Stop. Hartley. Make yourself comfortable, Anna repeated. For how long? Days, weeks, months. No mention of when he'd come. No provision for my survival while I waited. This isn't a delayed groom. This is abandonment. That's not... Malcolm started. There's more. A voice called from the crowd. Molly stood, producing a ledger. I've kept records of Miss Anna working in my diner those first weeks, washing dishes, serving customers, earning her keep honest when Mr. Hartley left her with nothing. She's been contributing to this community since the day she arrived, which is more than some can say. She looked pointedly at Malcolm. I can attest to her character as well. The voice shocked everyone, Mrs. Watson, the banker's wife, standing rigid as a fence post. I may have had concerns initially about Miss Hartley's arrangement, but I've watched her these months. She's brought dignity to her situation, improved the McBride household considerably, and shown moral fortitude in trying circumstances. She's earned her place here. More voices rose, the mercantile owner praising her honest dealings, the pastor noting her church attendance, even gruff mountain men commenting on how she'd helped during the winter storm preparations. The courtroom had become a chorus of support Anna hadn't expected. Mayor Phillips raised his hand for silence. Mr. Hartley, do you have any response to the telegram or to the community's testimony? Malcolm stood, his face blotchy with anger and embarrassment. She owes me for the train fare, which I'll pay. Rowan spoke for the first time, his voice cutting through the noise. He walked forward, pulling bills from his pocket. The full fare, plus interest for the delay. That settles any financial obligation. But the marriage contract was voided when you failed to appear. Mayor Phillips interrupted. I've heard enough. Miss Hartley was abandoned, left destitute, and has since established herself as a valuable member of our community through her own efforts. Mr. Hartley, you have no legal claim here. Take Mr. McBride's payment for the train fare and consider yourself fortunate that's all you're leaving with. The gavel came down with finality. Malcolm's lawyer gathered his papers, muttering about appeals and higher courts, but everyone knew it was over. Malcolm himself stood frozen, staring at Anna like he couldn't understand how his property had become a person. This isn't over, he hissed as he passed her. Yes, Anna said calmly. It is. The courtroom emptied slowly, people stopping to squeeze Anna's shoulder or murmur support. Molly hugged her tight, whispering, "Proud of you, girl." Even Mrs. Watson gave a sharp nod of approval before sweeping out. Finally, Only Anna and Rowan remained in the empty courtroom. Spring sunlight slanted through the windows, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air like tiny celebrations. "You paid the fare," Anna said quietly. "Seemed a small price to end his claim." "I'll pay you back." "No." Rowan moved closer, his expression serious. "That money bought your freedom from the past. Consider it my investment in the future." "Whose future?" He reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. "Ours, if you'll have it." Anna looked at their joined hands, his weathered and strong, hers work roughened but steady. "Are you asking something?" Rowan McBride. "I'm asking if you're ready to go home," he said simply. "Our home, not as my housekeeper, but as whatever you choose to be." Anna squeezed his hand, felt him squeeze back. "I chose long ago. I just didn't have the words yet. And now I'm ready to go home." They walked out of the courthouse together into the spring afternoon. The town square was still busy with people discussing the hearing, but Anna didn't care about their whispers anymore. She'd stood in front of the entire community and declared herself, not as Malcolm's abandoned bride or Rowan's kept woman, but as herself, Anna Hartley, who chose her own path. The wagon waited where they'd left it. Rowan helped her up, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. As they drove out of town, Anna looked back once at the courthouse where she'd finally severed the last chain to her old life. "No regrets?" Rowan asked, noting her backward glance. "None," Anna replied, turning to face forward toward the mountain road that led home. "The past is settled. Now we can build on clear ground." The wagon rolled on through spring mud and sunshine, carrying them back to the cabin that had become home through choice rather than circumstance. Behind them, Cedar Ridge buzzed with gossip about the hearing, but ahead, the mountains rose green with new growth, and the future stretched out like a road they'd travel together, step by chosen step. As they turned up the final stretch to the cabin, Anna saw the garden she'd been working that morning, the soil turned and ready for planting. Tomorrow she'd put in seeds, vegetables for summer eating, flowers for beauty, herbs for seasoning. All of it would grow through the season, tended by her hands and Rowan's, proof that something could be built from nothing more than intention and care. "We'll need to expand the garden," she said. "Double the size, at least. Planning on feeding the whole valley." "Planning on abundance," Anna corrected. "On having enough to share, to preserve, to build reserves against whatever winter comes." Rowan smiled, the expression transforming his weather-worn face. "Then we'd better get to work." "Together," Anna agreed, and the word held all the promise of seeds in spring soil, waiting for sun and rain and time to show what they could become. October had come round again to Cedar Ridge, painting the aspens gold and bringing that particular mountain clarity that made distances deceptive and memories sharp. Anna stood in her expanded garden, surveying the harvest with satisfaction that ran bone deep. The plot was twice the size it had been last spring, rows of vegetables ready for the final gathering, sunflowers tall as a man nodding their heavy heads, herbs fragrant in the cooling air. 1 year. It seemed impossible that only 1 year had passed since she'd stood on that train platform with her carpet bag and fading hope. Now she stood on land she'd helped work, looking at abundance she'd helped create, wearing a simple cotton dress she'd sewn herself from fabric bought with money earned from selling eggs in town. The chicken coop, fully restored and populated with 24 good-laying hens and a proud rooster, provided enough eggs for their needs plus extra for trade. She'd bartered eggs for fabric, for sugar, for the small luxuries that transformed a house from shelter to home. The preserved foods she'd put up through summer filled the root cellar shelves: tomatoes, green beans, piccalilli, apple butter, wild berry jam. The new shelves Rowan had built were painted white, clean and bright in the cellar's darkness. "Anna," Rowan called from the barn, "the Douglases are coming up the road." The harvest celebration had been her idea, though Rowan had embraced it once she'd explained her vision. Not a party exactly, but a gathering inviting the neighbors who'd become friends, sharing the abundance of their first full year together. She'd been cooking for 3 days fresh bread, 2 hams from the smokehouse, vegetables from the garden, pies from the wild apples that grew on the ridge. The house smelled like cinnamon and sage, wood smoke and plenty. She hurried inside to check the ham in the oven, pausing at the small mirror Rowan had hung by the door. Her face had gained color from mountain sun, fine lines at the corners of her eyes from squinting across bright gardens. She looked older, but somehow younger too. The permanent worry line between her brows had softened, replaced by something that might have been contentment. The main room had been transformed over the months. New curtains at the windows, simple blue calico that caught morning light. The rag rug she'd woven through winter evenings covered the floor before the hearth. Books had multiplied on their shelf, purchased or traded for in town. And on the mantel, in a place of honor, stood a photograph they'd had taken at the 4th of July celebration, she and Rowan standing stiff and formal for the traveling photographer, but with something in their eyes that suggested suppressed laughter. The Douglases arrived first, their wagon loaded with contributions, Mrs. Douglas's famous pickled beets, fresh cider from their press, a bushel of late pears. Their children tumbled out like puppies, immediately running to see the chickens they'd heard so much about. Mr. Douglas helped Rowan set up plank tables in the yard while Mrs. Douglas joined Anna in the kitchen. "This house," Mrs. Douglas said, looking around with approval. "It's alive again. You can feel it." Anna understood what she meant. The cabin that had felt like a held breath when she'd first arrived now exhaled warmth and welcome. Every corner showed signs of active living, Rowan's work gloves on the bench, Anna's knitting in a basket by the fire, 2 cups on the table instead of 1. More neighbors arrived as afternoon deepened toward evening. The Petersons from the next valley, bringing venison stew, the young Garrett couple with their new baby, offering dried flowers for decoration. Even Mrs. Watson came, her husband driving their fancy buggy, carrying a cut glass bowl that had probably cost more than Anna's entire wardrobe. "For your table," Mrs. Watson said stiffly, then added with something approaching warmth, "You've done well here, Anna." The yard filled with voices and laughter. Children chased chickens while adults admired the garden's productivity. Men gathered around Rowan's new fence posts, discussing the merits of different woods for mountain weather. Women helped Anna carry food outside, exclaiming over her preserves, asking for recipes, treating her not as the rescued mail-order bride but as an established neighbor. Molly arrived last, as the sun was setting behind the western peaks. She brought nothing but herself and her stories, which were contribution enough. "1 year ago tonight," she announced to the assembled group, "this girl walked into my diner looking like death warmed over. And this one," she pointed at Rowan, "was eating alone like he'd forgotten food could be shared." "Molly," Rowan warned, but he was almost smiling. "Oh, hush. I'm telling it true." Molly settled into the story like a comfortable chair. "There I was, ready to close up, when these two found each other over a blue willow plate. Didn't say barely a word, just split that meal like they'd been doing it forever." Anna felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she was smiling too. That night felt like another lifetime, when she'd been someone else entirely desperate, frightened, grasping at any kindness. "Knew right then," Molly continued, "that something was starting. Just didn't know what." "Neither did we," Anna admitted, glancing at Rowan. The gathering continued as stars emerged overhead. Someone brought out a fiddle, and couples danced on the packed earth of the yard. Children fell asleep in their mothers' arms. Stories were shared of other years, other harvests, the rhythm of mountain seasons that Anna was only beginning to understand. As the evening deepened, people began to drift away, wagons rolling down the mountain road with sleepy children and empty dishes. Anna and Rowan stood in the doorway of their cabin, watching the last lanterns disappear into darkness. "Good night," Rowan said quietly. "The best." Anna leaned against the doorframe, tired but deeply satisfied. "Though we'll be eating leftover ham for a week. Worth it, to see the place full of life again." They stood in comfortable silence, the kind that had grown between them through a year of shared work and quiet evenings. The moon, full like that first night, but now familiar, lit the yard where boot prints and wagon tracks recorded the evening's gathering. "Anna," Rowan said, his voice taking on a formal tone she rarely heard. "There's something I need to say." She turned to face him, finding him closer than expected in the doorway. "This year," he continued, "has been nothing like I expected. When I offered you that meal, that ride, I thought I was providing temporary shelter, maybe a few weeks of housekeeping until you found something better. And now I can't imagine this place without you. Can't imagine not seeing you in the garden at sunrise, or sharing coffee at first light, or arguing about whether we need more chickens." "We definitely need more chickens," Anna interjected, making him laugh. "See that? The way you make me laugh when I'd forgotten how. The way you brought this place back to life without trying to erase what came before." He reached into his pocket, pulled out something small that caught moonlight. "I ordered these from the Sears catalog. Maybe presumptuous, but..." 2 simple gold bands lay in his palm. Nothing fancy, nothing elaborate, just circles of gold that meant permanence, belonging, chosen commitment. "Is this a proposal, Rowan McBride?" Anna asked, though her voice trembled slightly. "It's whatever you want it to be. Proposal, promise, recognition of what already exists." He met her eyes directly. "I love you, Anna, not desperately or dramatically, but steady and sure, like sunrise or spring wheat growing. If you'll have me, I'd like to make it official, put both our names on the deed, stand up in front of Reverend Morrison and make promises we've already been keeping." Anna looked at the rings, at Rowan's weathered face, at the cabin behind them that had become home through accumulated choices. She thought of that first night, pushing the plate between them, sharing without words. How far they'd traveled from that moment, yet how it had contained everything that followed. "I chose this long ago," she said, echoing words from the courthouse. "That first morning when I fed your sourdough starter, when we planted wheat together, when you stood beside me at the harvest dance, every small choice has been choosing this, choosing us." She took one of the rings, the smaller one, and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if ordered with her exact measurement, which, knowing Rowan's thoroughness, it probably had been. "Yes," she said simply, "to all of it. To marriage, to partnership, to whatever we build from here." Rowan's smile transformed his face. Years falling away in joy. He put on his own ring, then caught her hands in his. "When?" "Soon, before winter sets in. A simple ceremony, just community and Molly crying in the front row. She'll be insufferable. She's earned it." They stood there in the doorway between inside and outside, between past and future, holding hands like young lovers despite the calluses and weathering that marked them as people who'd lived full lives already. The moon continued its path across the sky, marking time's passage and promises made. Finally, they went inside, the evening's work still waiting, dishes to wash, tables to return to the barn, leftover food to store. But first, Rowan added wood to the fire and Anna made coffee, and they sat at the same table where that first breakfast had established their partnership. "I have something else," Anna said, producing a folded paper from her apron pocket. "From town yesterday. The bank had it drawn up proper." Rowan unfolded it, reading slowly in the lamplight. His eyes widened. "The deed. You already had both names added? Mr. Watson owed me a favor after his wife's very public support at the hearing. Seemed the right use for it." Anna traced the wood grain of the table with one finger. "This is my home, Rowan. Our home. Has been since that first night. I think the paper just makes it official. Like the rings. Exactly like the rings." And they sat with their coffee, planning quietly the ceremony. The winter preparation still needed. The expansion of the chicken operation come spring. Practical discussions between two practical people. but underneath ran a current of joy that warmed more than the fire. "That first night," Rowan said suddenly, "when I pushed that plate across, I didn't know what I was doing. Not really. Just knew you needed food and I had plenty. And now I know it was the smartest thing I've ever done, sharing that meal." Anna reached across the table, covered his hand with hers, their new rings catching lamplight. "We're still sharing it. In a way, every meal at this table continues that first one." Outside, wind moved through the pines with a sound like whispered blessings. The lamp burned steady in the window, the same lamp Rowan had left burning that first night, not wanting to come home to darkness. Now it burned because someone was home, because darkness had been driven back by more than flame, because two people had chosen to build light together in a small cabin on a large mountain. The dishes could wait. The evening's cleaning could be tomorrow's task. Tonight, they sat at their table where it all began, wearing rings ordered from a catalog, holding a deed with both names inscribed, planning a future neither had imagined when desperation and kindness had first intersected over a shared plate. The harvest was complete, not just the garden's bounty, but the slower harvest of trust becoming love, arrangement becoming commitment, two separate lives becoming one shared story. And at its heart, as simple and essential as bread, was that first moment of grace, a plate pushed to the center of a table, a fork placed within reach, an offer made without words that had grown into a life neither could have imagined alone. I've told you this story because I believe we've forgotten something essential about how lives are truly saved, not through grand gestures or desperate romance, but through the simple act of pushing a plate across a table, of saying no explaining needed, of offering dignity along with shelter. Anna wasn't rescued by Rowan, she was recognized. He saw her hunger but also her strength, her need but also her capability. That's the difference between charity and grace. One diminishes while the other elevates. When we share what we have, expecting nothing but hoping for everything, we create the possibility for chosen family. Every community is built on such moments, the barely noticed kindnesses that become foundations. Molly knew this when she refilled that coffee cup without asking. The townspeople knew it when they stood up at the hearing, testifying not to perfection but to presence, to someone who'd chosen to stay and contribute rather than just survive. Gratitude isn't about debt. It's about recognizing that we're all sitting at the same table, sometimes hungry, sometimes able to share. Today you push the plate across. Tomorrow someone pushes it toward you. That's not transaction, that's family. And family, the kind we choose through daily acts of faith, is how we turn wilderness into home.